the heck out of being scared. And one thing
I don't think anybody enjoys that shit.
scares an awful lot of people is toy dolls.
Oh my gosh.
From Chucky to
Like, you can just so clearly tell that that was put in reverse.
the boy, there's just something about a blank expression and a pair of glass eyes that wigs people out, you know? But perhaps the most popular...
This is what I'm saying, though. They're all toys from that era. Like, tell me a haunted toy from 2000. Doesn't exist.
Creepy toys right now is Annabelle, especially because she has a true story behind her, and it might even be more terrifying than the films. So first, check under your bed, and then let's.
I don't like that because now I'm actually gonna have to look under my
you might all be very
bed.
familiar with the movie version of Annabelle. In The Conjuring from 2013, the film opens with a spooky true story. A porcelain doll was given to a hapless student nurse, only it soon began to act weird. And then it got super scary. But compared to the true story that inspired the movie, there are some pretty huge differences. For a start, Annabelle was nothing like the creepy doll in The Conjuring. It was actually this sweet old little
My
rag
grandma
doll
had like
looks pretty
6 of
harmless,
those things.
right? Now, like I said, it looks nothing like the one from the film, which I would never want to keep in my house. I could actually understand wanting to own the Raggedy Ann, which is exactly how all of this started. Way back in 1970, when a woman gave her daughter, Deidre, although some sources call her Donna, a Raggedy Ann doll for her 28th birthday. Guess she was inspired by this old commercial?
Your kids will have as much fun with Raggedy Ann as you did.
My grandma had like life-size ones.
Little odd for a grown-up to get a doll, but it was a cute gift all the same. Maybe Deidre owned one when she was growing up, and her mom wanted to give her something a little nostalgic. The story goes that Deidre, or Donna, was a student nurse who lived with her roommate in an apartment building. She used to take the doll to bed with her, but it wasn't long before she started noticing
What did you get for food, Chris?
cuddly doll acting super weird. At first, she found it sitting in different places on her bed. Then it started turning up in completely different rooms from where she'd left it. Deidre started bringing it to
Like,
breakfast with her.
Let's just think about this logically.
And
She
and
was
her roommate
sleepwalking and moved it.
saw it move its arms on their own. Finding all this more interesting than scary, the nurses thought that the doll had a spirit inside of it. So they got in touch with a medium to speak to it. They held a
Leftover pork chops? Honestly, pork chops?
seance.
Pork chops?
Spirit actually
Bottom tier
spoke to
meat.
them. The medium told them that the
Ass
Raggedy Ann
meat, to be
doll was
honest.
hosting the spirit of Annabelle Higgins, a girl who had passed away and was possibly murdered near their apartment building when she
Pork chops are always like dry and like.
was very
You know?
young. Annabelle's spirit was lonely, and she had sensed kindness in the two nurses, so she hung out within the doll. She asked if they would make her part of their home. Because they were both caring people, the two nurses immediately agreed to let Annabelle hang out with them, which makes them braver than me. I'd have moved apartments. Instead, they welcomed Annabelle and treated her like a person, just like she wanted. They even gave her clothes and bracelets to wear. Unfortunately, sweet
People are
Annabelle was about
insane.
to show her true colors, and she wasn't at all what they thought. More odd things began to happen around the doll. The nurses started to hear knocking sounds, their rooms would get cold for no reason, and they heard creepy whispering, which they just couldn't explain. Then one night, after their shifts had both ended at the same time, the two nurses came home to find Annabelle standing up in the hallway, like she was waiting for them. Remember, this is a very floppy doll with very soft legs. When they tried to make her do that standing pose again, it was totally impossible. One of the students had a fiance who wanted them to just get rid of Annabelle. He
They
even
killed
said
them.
that they should burn her.
That's what
That
I'm
sounded
saying.
like a pretty good idea, but I think saying this in front of her was his big mistake. That night, he had a terrifying nightmare that Annabelle had floated right above him and then tried to strangle
If I get some crazy ass dreams tonight, so help me.
him. He could not get her to move. Freaked out by this nightmare, when he woke up, he threw Annabelle across the room and yelled at her. Suddenly, 7 big scratches appeared on his body. If
Oh
that
my
wasn't
God.
terrifying enough, the nurses began getting creepy messages on parchment paper. The weirdest part was that none of them owned parchment paper. While they tried to see if anyone was breaking in, their tests on the doors seemed to prove that the apartment was free of intruders. So, this was all on their new housemate, Annabelle. The final straw came when they found little spots of what seemed like blood on Annabelle's hands and chest. It was time to call in some
I'm saying somebody murdered someone and blames it on a doll.
help. So they went to their local Catholic church for guidance. But their priest knew some paranormal professionals who would be able
Like, I believe in aliens way more than I believe in this shit. First, like, you know what I mean?
to clear this up once and for all.
There's no way people believe in ghosts more than aliens.
Now, you know that
I don't like this. It makes me feel sick.
sweet married couple from the Conjuring movies?
Well, we've been called
Maybe it's just
ghost
the
hunters,
fact that I
paranormal
ate
researchers.
5
So
pieces
We
of
prefer
pizza.
to be known simply as Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Ed and Lorraine Warren founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, NESPR, way back in 1952. They made a living helping people with ghosts and other things in between. Over the next 40 years, they apparently investigated over 10,000 alleged hauntings and demonic possessions. So, in the 1970s and 80s, this was who you were gonna call if there was a spook in your basement, attic, or toy box.
brings us to the 3 stages of demonic activity: infestation, oppression, and possession. The infestation, that's the whispering, the footsteps, the feeling of another presence.
This is the real Lorraine Warren.
In 1971, the Raggedy Ann version of Annabelle would be their first major case. They interviewed the student nurses to see if they could help with Annabelle's bad behavior. But the Warrens were horrified
Imagine
when
I
they
just
heard
something
that the
bad
nurses were
happens to
treating
me wrong.
Annabelle like a real person because they had a really good idea of what she really was. Something totally terrifying.
God does not allow the spirit of a child to go into a doll. This was a demon who was posing as that little child to create sympathy to these 2 young women.
So, what could they do to stop something that evil? Sounds like an exorcism was needed, which is a very risky ceremony. Luckily, Ed Warren was one of the only people in the Catholic Church allowed to perform that ritual. The Warrens cleansed the house, the nurses, and their partners of Annabelle's evil influence. But the doll was much too powerful to leave lying around. Deidre must have been so relieved when the Warrens agreed to take Annabelle back to their place for safekeeping. The Warrens did not have a happy drive home with her either. And apparently, the car broke down a lot on the journey back. I think we know who to blame for that. Things didn't calm down until they splashed Annabelle with holy water. That's pretty scary. But even when they finally got Annabelle to her new home, the creepiness kept coming. Ed says he caught the doll floating beside his desk, so they kept her in a separate part of their house, but Annabelle still wasn't done. Even the priests weren't safe. The Warrens were friends with a priest who one day took them for a ride in his brand new car. Later, he asked to see Annabelle the doll. He looked
There's
at her,
no way, like, I
picked
just-
her up, and
I don't
threw
know,
her
man.
across the room. According to Ed, the priest said,
God is
Like, you
more
can't trust
powerful
anyone
than
named
a
Ed,
devil.
right?
but that didn't stop Annabelle from messing with them. A few
Like,
hours
I have an uncle
later,
named
the
Ed,
police
and
drove
that
home
guy's just a
only to
jokester.
get into a major accident.
Half of his car was sheared off by a tractor trailer truck. He should have been killed, but he lived. The last thing he remembers seeing was the image of that doll.
He was luckier than most.
Whether they're furry, feathered, scaly, or
There's just
thin,
no way, right?
PetSmart has everything you need.
In another story, a homicide detective who had probably seen some extremely nasty stuff in his career had picked up Annabelle while Ed Warren was out of the room. It's unclear what she did to the guy, but it left him too traumatized to speak about it. In fact, they kept all the cursed objects from their case files, just like Annabelle, in their Oculate Museum. It's a vault for nightmares.
Everything in here has been taken from some place where people were either killed
See?
or
Science.
maimed or so many ways.
I can't believe that this was right beside their house. Though they got all these objects blessed by a priest once a week, the Warrens
You're right.
never
Ed Sheeran is,
destroyed
like,
them
the
in
head of
case
all
they
Eds, I feel
released
like.
demonic energy inside.
But, like, the
Plus,
further you get down the
they
chain of
had to charge
Eds,
for
like,
admission.
Ed Sheeran is
How
at the
did
top.
they get all of this?
The
Like I
rest are
said
just,
earlier, Annabelle was
trickle-down
only their
effect.
first really terrifying case. but she's definitely the most dangerous object they kept there. But their measures still weren't good enough. The creepiest Annabelle story of all is when a group of college students visited the museum. One
Who the hell is
student mocked
Mr. Ed?
the Annabelle doll, daring her to slash him. This was a very bad idea. Ed Warren threw him and his girlfriend out of the museum, and they drove off on their motorbike.
Less than 3 hours later, that boy was dead. His girlfriend, who had been with him on a motorcycle, said he was laughing about the doll, smashed into a tree, head on, was killed instantly.
The girlfriend survived, but was
But can the ghost hear me talking about it from like a million miles away?
hospitalized for a year. Pretty creepy stuff, right? The Warrens say that you shouldn't challenge the devil, and this
But there's also like, you ever see the things where it's like conspiracy theories where it's like, this person did 9/11 because their fourth letter of their name was an A, and the fourth letter of someone's last name was an A, and then his distant cousin's mom's dog, Walker's Goldfish, also had an A in his name, and like Buddy's also had a pet penguin, and Jimmy John had a pet penguin on this. Then they were both penguins were born on the same day. Like, if you look deep enough, you're gonna find coincidences. You know what I mean? Probably it's a ghost. Well, I thought they're stuck to like the thing they haunt or the thing they possess.
just seems to prove it.
Literally, like they're
The
extra
Warrens were involved
planar.
in a
What does
lot
that mean?
of other famous hauntings too. Many of them you might just recognize from the movies. One of the most famous was the Amityville Horror in 1975. Here, an evil spirit in a cursed house.
Also, like, why doesn't someone just take one for the team? Like, okay, you might be going out, but at least no one else is getting cursed by the doll. Like, just take them with you to the grave. You know what I mean? Either get buried with that thing, or just, jump in a fire with it. Just take one for the team.
Tormented one family so much.
Not
that
a specific
ran
doll,
away
but
in the
I'm just
middle
saying
of
in
the
general,
night.
so
It became a very famous
no
story
one come haunt me,
and
but just,
a series
you know.
of over 11 movies.
28 days after the Lutz family moved
Like, it's a
into their
money
green
maker.
house,
Of course people are gonna, like, build the lore.
they were running for their lives. What happened to them?
That's what I mean, though. The coincidences are, like, they're nuts when you look at any type of, like, conspiracy like that. They just build and build and, like...
Too. But that film was mainly about another big case they were involved in. This one took place in the UK in 1977 and was known as the Enfield Poltergeist.
They're calling it England's Amityville. There is a family that
Why does Buddy got Halo Reach music on?
Everything we've seen, there isn't much that rattles either of us anymore. But this one still haunts me.
While the Warrens weren't quite as involved as the film tried to show, it was a super scary case. And it happened to the Hodgson family in a totally normal street in Enfield, near London. Teenage sisters Janet and Margaret and their brother Billy were being tormented by an angry ghost called a poltergeist. It did some really weird things, making furniture move on its own and throwing them out of bed. The family constantly...
there's no way. Someone's, like, they were kids and someone was trolling the other kid, right?
Heard loud knocking on the walls and terrifying noises. If that wasn't creepy enough, they sometimes got possessed.
I'm getting... Bro, the first house I buy is gonna be fucking cursed because of all this.
Is anyone there just now?
Yeah. Hi, Joe.
Who's that?
What?
Who's that, Janet?
Look, he's laughing.
They'd realized that the creepy voice was being caused by an old man named Bill Wilkins. Bill
Fucking, you can't trust
apparently
Bills
said,
either.
I had a hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died in a chair in the corner downstairs. Totally terrifying! Other investigators reported seeing Janet floating, and toys and shoes were thrown at them while the family was definitely all fast asleep. The strangest part of the Enfield case is that a lot of people saw these supernatural things happening. Trust me, real witnesses are very rare. Friends and neighbors and even a crossing guard had seen the weird events around the house, including Janet floating. Even the police didn't know what to make of a chair moving by itself.
It came off the floor, or nearly a half inch, I should say, and I saw it slide off to the right, about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest.
If even the UK police say it's real,
Bro.
then I'm pretty convinced, aren't you? After 18 months,
Everyone ever watched the show Haunting? No, I don't watch scary shit because they don't belong in my life.
But plenty of people don't believe that any of this is real at all. While it can be fun to believe in creepy stuff like this, you do have to wonder if it does more harm than good. For a start, if it is all real, then this probably encourages more people to mess with things that they really shouldn't. And if it isn't real, it probably still affects your mental health in some really damaging ways. Your mind can play some crazy tricks.
That's what I mean. I think it's placebo.
On you. Take the phenomenon of recording the voices of the dead, or EVP, or electric voice phenomenon. It's when you record silence in a room and either a ghost or something else answers on the replay. EVP is used a lot in ghost hunting shows.
And we had a camera in the room where you saw the woman on the bed, and we captured a voice right in this area. He says just one word.
Was it saying yeah, like she's getting piped down on the bed?
It's a woman's voice.
Or is it? Now, Darren Brown is a professional mind manipulator, and often...
There you go, mind manipulator. He's making you think you hear things.
Investigates the truth behind a lot of supernatural claims. He asked a forensic engineer for advice. This is someone who translates sounds in court cases, so he has to be truthful. After they played an EVP recording to him, he said...
Yeah, but that can't hold up in court. I guarantee that doesn't hold up in court because it's scientifically proven that your brain is trained to like make patterns of things and hear things and make them think that there's something that they're not.
To me, more like electronic interference that happened to be picked up by a highly sensitive recorder as a result of radio waves. And I believe you could interpret them as guttural sounds of the voice if you wanted to.
What's sadder is that a lot of these experiences of the haunted people in the Warren case files do fall under symptoms for schizophrenia, addiction issues, and family troubles in general. It's a pity no one was ever allowed to verify anything the Warrens did. Ed didn't tend to let anyone verify the details, although they shared some information in the movies and books. And that's a pretty big red flag to me. Like, the nurses they rescued from Annabelle conveniently refused to appear on any record to at least certify their story.
I've talked with people just recently, as recent as 2 months ago, who know the two nurses. And even today, they don't like to talk about it. They'll never come to our lectures. And they don't want to talk about Raggedy Ann, Annabelle at all.
But what I really have to wonder is if the objects in the museum were really dangerous, then why on earth would the public be allowed near them? Even just to look at. It's like getting a tour of a minefield. Totally exciting, but very risky.
I'm saying.
Just saying. Although the Warrens never directly took money from people they helped, the book sales, seminar tours, and the movies certainly didn't hurt their bank balance.
That's what I'm saying, team.
Now, people have been skeptical, and a lot of people called the Warrens liars throughout their careers. It's also a shame that they didn't have access to the kind of cameras and other recording equipment that we have today. And it's also a pity that so many of the cases they worked on had witnesses who preferred to stay anonymous. While I can't blame
Pretty
people
convenient,
for
isn't
wanting
it?
to forget the scary things as fast as possible, it does make it all hard to prove. Now that both Ed and Lorraine have passed away, the trail has kind of run cold. Though I guess we could do a seance. Just kidding. And whether or not Annabelle Higgins and the Enfield poltergeist are true or a big hoax, they did at least create some really scary movies. And anyway, with deep fakes and the confirmation of real UFOs out there, it's getting harder and harder to be sure of what's a hoax and what isn't. Yeah, makes you think, right? But you know, if it was between a demon and some of the real life monsters I've spoken about in my other videos, I'd probably pick the demon every time. So, what do you think about these scary stories?
That's what I'm saying, team.
Sometimes